community advancement. This is a truly a citywide effort along those lines. And I definitely want to say goal, our hope, our purpose of hosting this particular event is to educate candidates and their staff about the history of the tax lien sale, the law currently in effect, and our vision for ways to replace this system with one that keeps homeowners in their homes and promotes affordability through community land trust. This is going to be truly an informative session. And in addition to that, we would definitely, just a few housekeepings. We're going to ask anyone as you hear the presentations, please enter all your questions in the Q&A, and they will be answered accordingly during the Q&A segment. We are definitely excited for everyone that has attended and decided to know more about this effort and our hopes as a coalition to get rid of this predatory and this economic violent tool that's in our communities throughout the city. With that being said, I am looking to hand this one more thing. The slides will also be available. We will be sending out the slides for the attendees that are here today. And with that being said, I will hand it over to Paula.
Thank you so much, Al. It's great to be here. My name is Paula Siegel. I'm Senior Staff Attorney in the Equitable Neighborhoods Practice at Take Great Justice, and I'm going to take us deep, not that deep, but somewhat deep into the past before I was born, in a moment that feels very alive in the imaginations of many bureaucrats in our city who every time we say something should be different, they say, oh, but it's going to be the 70s again. And I personally have heard that answer to a lot of different suggestions, many of which have been implemented over the years. And it is not the 70s again. It is 2021. 2021 is weird, but it is not like 1972. The 70s, the city was in dire economic straits. Property abandonment was commonplace. Cities all over the country were actually in dire straits. We were in a very different kind of crisis then. And at that time, the way the city did its debt collection was through in-rem foreclosures. And as the economy plummeted, the city took title to tens of thousands of buildings through in-rem foreclosure to a level that led some academics to describe New York City's Housing Preservation and Development Department as the second largest public housing authority in the nation, second only to NYCHA. New York City was the landlord to a lot of people, but it was also using that pipeline of properties to transfer many buildings to cooperative tenant ownership and to nonprofit developers. In-rem foreclosures worked for tax collection. They were a good threat, right? You don't pay your taxes, you don't pay your bills, you don't pay your water, the city's gonna take your building. But there was a problem. The city had to be a landlord. And up until 1993, actually the city was free to be a slumlord. The city said, we didn't buy these buildings, we didn't mean to do this, we didn't invest in this, we're trying to do our best, we're just trying to keep roofs over these people's heads. Sometimes the water's off for a year, sorry. And they got away with it for decades until 1993, when a court said, no, City of New York, you're a landlord like all other landlords. And like all other landlords, you must keep your buildings up to code. And the City of New York said, whoa, wait a second. That really changes the game. And in 1993, the city stopped taking title to buildings. And they were pretty public about the fact that they were going to stop taking title to buildings. Despite that, when the new Rudy Giuliani administration came into office in 1996, it started doing an analysis of what it was going to do and all the opportunities it had inherited. And one of the things that they said was that in rem foreclosure was an extremely effective and relatively inexpensive mechanism for coercing property tax payments, yet they still got rid of it. They got rid of it because they were trying to achieve some other ends. They privatized tax collection. They created a system through which lots of private actors, which we'll hear about in a moment, got to benefit from helping New Yorkers pay their municipal bills. And they really shrunk the pipeline of buildings that where title would ever transfer through the city doing an in rem foreclosure action. One of the big things that they changed was when in rem foreclosure was initiated by the city, it would no longer be the city that took title at the end of the foreclosure. It would go through the third-party transfer program, which was open to both nonprofit and for-profit developers, and they would be the ones that would get the buildings. Lots of tenant-run cooperatives have been developed through that program over the years. But that's not the focus of our conversation now. What we're going to focus on is this brand new thing that Rudy Giuliani invented with his friends at the banks and Arthur Andersen, a consulting firm that mostly works for the banks. They invented a system through which liens would be sold to a privately funded trust in a single bulk transaction. Selling debt is actually something that's been happening ever since there was debt. Someone would get into debt and then there would be somebody who would buy from the lender. And in fact, lien sales are something that's been happening in New York City since the 1800s. You could buy a lien on a single property. But what the Giuliani administration did is say, you know what, we're going to sell them all. We're going to sell them all at once. And we're going to sell them to a hedge fund. And we're going to sell them to a hedge fund at 72 cents on the dollar, so that our friends in that industry can make a little bit of money. So the way that the lien sale works is that residents owe the city money and they can't pay it on time. The city empowers a trust with a private entity. It's often been the Bank of New York Mellon. It's been a couple of different banks over the years since the 1990s. And then the trust sells bonds to wealthy investors. These are people either with an individual high net worth or institutional investors. They get their money, they put it all together, and then they buy the city's debt at 72 cents on the dollar. Pay the city less than the individuals owed, right? A lot less, 28% less. And then they get all of the outstanding taxes and they get the right to add penalties and interest and actually collect 100% of what the property owners owed. The trust hires a servicing company that tries to collect the debt. They add fees and interest, and the money starts flying out of homeowners' pockets. If they can get the money, if they can get a loan, the trust gets the value of the taxes, plus the servicer gets paid, and all of the parties in between. The Bank of New York, then there's our profit. That guy pockets that little bit of money as just for his efforts. There's lots of people in this system who get paid just for their efforts, right? The people who advertise the bonds, the people who buy the bonds and then get paid back with interest by the Bank of New York Mellon. Our wealthy lady over here, she just made some money. But if the property owner actually can't pay the servicer, the trust has the power to foreclose, to actually initiate a case in court that will lead to eventually the loss of a home. The trust, when the vultures are circling, often the property owner will try to take care of the problem by taking out a loan. right? Maybe a usurious loan, maybe a loan with a lot of interest because they are trying to save their home and they are trying to save their equity. And sometimes they'll just sell to somebody else for whatever they can get. Let's see. And the house disappears from that person. Everybody still gets paid, right? This family loses a home, but all of these people in this transaction still get paid. But what the city loses is actually, it loses affordable housing, because at the end of all of that, either through a sale directly or through a post foreclosure sale, investors take off with the affordable housing. If after all of the people who are running the system get paid, there's any money left, the city might make a couple of cents back. And it used to be at the beginning of all of this that there's some evidence that the city used to get paid back by the Bank of New York that was administering the trust. We've been asking the city the last couple of lien cycles saying, so wait a second, where's the revenue line from that money that's supposed to be left over? And nobody's been able to find it. And knowing all of the different companies that have to get paid to run this system, my understanding is that everybody knows exactly how much money there's going to be in the end. And they just make sure that all the fees and all the servicers and all the advertising and everybody who's actually involved in this system uses it all up, because there has been no evidence that anything has been coming back to the city at the end. The city does get its 72 cents on the dollar up front. The city of New York is doing this to its detriment. Looking at other cities that don't do this, they have better tax collection rates, much better. The median for US cities is 96.9. Boston collects 98% of its property taxes. San Francisco collects 97. Los Angeles collects 94. We are down there with 92. No, we're lucky it's only 92. But this is over 10 years, and we'll be sending these slides out, but there is a citation on this slide to a really great dissertation that was written a couple of years ago, looking at the history and comparing what New York City does to the last few years. And I'll turn it over to Hannah.
Thanks, Paula. So now we're going to go through the basics of how property tax collection under the tax lien sale works. But to first start with the basics, who owes property taxes? Pretty much everyone owes property taxes. So, apartment building owners, commercial building owners, and then small homeowners. But there are some exceptions. Charity property owners, such as those that own churches, cemeteries, community gardens, theaters, community centers are exempt. There's also properties that receive housing tax abatements. And then there's also government-owned properties such as, city parks, NYCHA, and EDC. And the state is in charge of how taxes are owed. Next slide, please. So now to walk through how property tax debt collection actually works. I'm going to walk through it step by step. So when a property owner does not pay their taxes on time, the city sends bills to the property owner for, it could be water, property tax, or emergency repairs. Next slide. Then the city sends 90 and 60-day notices telling the property owners that if their bills are not paid, they will sell their debt to a private trust. So then the city does sell the debt to a private tax lien sale trust, which is made up of private investors and developers. And then the trust sells the debt to investors in the form of bonds. And the city recoups 72 cents on the dollar for unpaid debt, so they do not recoup the full amount of the debt. And then the tax lien trust sends threatening bill collectors after these property owners and stacks on high interest and fees. And then the tax lien trust actually starts foreclosure action, or it will keep the liens in order to continue to accrue interest. It depends on the profitability of the property itself. And the tax lien trust makes a calculated decision based on the profitability, whether to start the foreclosure action or just continue to stack on interest rates and get the interest from the property owner. And then the property owner, the tax lien trust will initiate a foreclosure action, and then we'll auction off the property to the highest bidder. As we're demonstrating, it's all about profit. And the outcome is that the property owner loses their home. Next slide. Okay, and so now I'm going to pass it off to Ivy, who's going to talk about the impacts of the tax lien sale.
Can you hear me now? Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. So I'm going to talk about what Paula alluded to, which are the bad effects on the city and the reasons why the tax lien sale is so terrible. As Hannah and Paula have both said, most people pay their taxes, but the city makes mistakes and occasionally sells liens on properties exempt from taxes or that are exempt from the tax lien sale. Or in the case of some people, they don't record that the payments were made at all. And sometimes liens are sold for homeowners that aren't even delinquent. And part of the harm of the tax lien sale process is that once their liens are sold, they really lose recourse with the city. Even though the city is responsible for what's happened, they're now having to deal with private actors that really have their own profits in mind. Moreover, some slumlord, can you go back? Thank you, sorry. Moreover, some slumlord-owned buildings go through the lien sale every year, and that changes without changing the conditions for their suffering tenants. Similarly, some liens on vacant land are also sold again year after year, and instead of selling the lien, those pieces of vacant land could be really good opportunities for the city to develop more affordable housing. Finally, a lot of low-income homeowners are pushed towards displacement by the lien sale when in fact they're the homeowners most in need of help. And now we can go to the next slide. Thank you. And sadly, a lot of these low-income homeowners are disproportionately working-class communities of color. A 2019 analysis that the Center for New York City Neighborhoods did of the tax lien sales, or last year. Oh, my audio is muddled. Is this better? I'll do this young people thing. So we found that liens are much more likely to be sold in census tracts with majority Black and majority Hispanic homeowners than in other areas. And later on, we'll show a map and you could see really the impact of that. And we have found this to be true year after year in the lien sale. It really hits communities of color the hardest. Another community that is really hit hard by the lien sale are seniors. Unlike other populations, seniors are more likely to have paid off the mortgages on their homes, and so they're more likely to have to pay their taxes on their own. In 2017, there were more than 323 senior homeowner households in the city. That's almost a third of the city's homeowner households. So seniors really are a huge chunk of the homeowners in the city, and they're also really liable to be hurt by the tax lien sale because a lot of them are on fixed incomes and they don't have their bank automatically paying their taxes. Something else that we find is that although seniors are, anybody receiving an enhanced STAR exemption shouldn't be in the lien sale, the center has found that there are probably far fewer senior homeowners receiving that enhanced STAR exemption than actually need it. And this is one of the really crucial elements of the tax lien sale of when we try to address homeowners that have been caught in the tax lien sale is we immediately try to see what are the things that should have kept you out of the tax lien sale that didn't. What are the cracks that you fell through? And we find that there are a lot of them. Next slide. Finally, unsurprisingly, when individuals and communities are hurt by the tax lien sale, it causes a lot of turnover in communities. So an older analysis that we did found that 42% of the homes that had liens sold on them changed hands within 5 years. So really people that even if they're able to redeem on their tax liens, probably the financial distress that they put them in, probably the vultures that Paula talked about, the loan sharks that they went to, that probably exacerbated their distress to the point where they had to eventually lose their home. And so to sum it up, the tax lien sale for not very much benefit hurts the most vulnerable and really very crucial parts of New York City: working class homeowners, seniors, people of color, people that are the heart and soul of the city. And so we need to change. And now I'll leave it to, I'm sorry, who's next? Afia?
Thank you, Ivy, for sharing that information. And now we're going to hear from Will.
Sorry about that, Will.
No worries. Hi, everyone. My name is Will Spizak with the New Economy Project. New Economy Project works with community groups to build new economy that works for all, based on principles of cooperation, democracy, equity, racial justice, and ecological sustainability. And as we take a look at this map, we're going to, dive into the tax lien sale as it is today, right? The 2021 list. And just want to remind folks that this isn't a new issue, right? As Paula and Ivy have been, highlighting for us. New Economy Project has been, part of coalitions to fight this tax lien sale for a long time, particularly during the subprime lending and foreclosure crisis, where we saw the tax lien sale contribute to destabilizing and extracting wealth from BIPOC homeowners that were already at risk of foreclosure and exposure to deed theft and other abuses. And it's the same pattern that we see today. So if you take a look at a map of where the foreclosure crisis hit the hardest in the city and look at this map of the 2021 tax lien sale risk pool, you'll notice some clear similarities, right? That they're the same neighborhoods, the same communities that are being deeply impacted. If you look at the map, you can obviously tell that the tax lien sale impacts all parts of the city, right? So no matter what district you're running in, this is an issue that applies to you. But it disproportionately affects Black and brown neighborhoods, the same neighborhoods that have historically experienced disinvestment and redlining, and today continue to be banking deserts and centers of predatory lending and foreclosure. If we go to the next slide, we zoom in a little bit, and you can see, again, that these neighborhoods that are kind of the center of so many of the housing and financial crises that the city has experienced time and time again, continue to be the most vulnerable to this predatory practice. If you go to the next slide, we break it down by borough. As you can see, again, it affects everyone, but certain neighborhoods, certain boroughs, Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx in particular, have the most numerous cases. And again, going back to that map, these cases are clearly concentrated in Black and brown areas such as South Brooklyn and Southeast Queens. To the next slide. In here, we just kind of laid out the 2021 tax lien sale pool as it applies to different types of buildings, different classes of properties throughout the city. So class 1 properties, that's the light blue, represents residential properties, 1, 2, and 3 unit buildings. Class 2 properties are rentals, co-ops, condominiums, your larger residential buildings. And class 4, it's kind of a catch-all, includes commercial and industrial properties, office spaces, retail, etc. So as you can see laid out here, there's a diverse mix of properties that end up in the lien sale. Queens, Brooklyn, the Bronx could we have a lot of Class 1 properties on the lien sale, meaning that it's homeowners and unregulated tenants in those small homes that are being subject to ballooning debts and the destabilization that follows from it. If you go to the next slide as well, you could see what I think Paula and Ivy had alluded to in terms of vacant lots. So in addition to those properties, that might be occupied and might be used that end up on the lien sale, we have a number of properties this year, 282 properties that ended vacant properties that ended up on the lien sale. And we refer to this as lost opportunities because these properties represent over 800,000 buildable residential square feet, right? So we could potentially build 890 units of housing on these vacant lots that remain, underutilized, not, well maintained, and end up on the tax lien sale list. The issue of vacancies, in the city has attracted a lot of attention recently. We co-authored a paper in 2020 called "Commodifying Our Communities" with some other groups that are here, and we, made the case for, creating a pipeline of where we can take some of these properties that are, on the tax lien sale and convert them to social housing and community land trusts that you'll hear more about later. But notably, that there are so many vacant properties that could be turned into housing or commercial spaces, manufacturing, green infrastructure projects that could be built on community-owned land that could, be ciphered through this, from this tax lien list to, community groups that are willing to build out those projects and center them around community control. And unfortunately, we're not there yet, but we do hope to share our vision for how to get there. So let me pass it over to Deborah.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Deborah, and I am on the executive board at the East New York CLT, Community Land Trust. I'm going to talk to you this evening about the Abolish the New York City Lien Sale Coalition and what we have done and where we intend to go. First, I'd like you to know that we've held workshops and roundtables to educate the community about the tax lien sale and to build consensus about how to reform the lien sale. Back to what Will was saying about the vacant lots, the East New York CLT has surveyed over 250 vacant lots in East New York alone to only find out that 99% of these lots are owned by HPD. Like Will said, it's a loss. These lots can be turned into truly affordable homes through a CLT, Community Land Trust, which you will learn about a little later on. But it's a loss that these vacant lots are up there. And why? There probably were homes there that were on the tax lien sale, and now the homes have been in such a disarray that they've been demolished, and now we have empty lots sitting there. But like I said, we've been educating the community, holding roundtables about the tax lien sale and the reform of the lien sale. Me personally, I've done over 75 to 100 phone calls to homeowners who are or were on a tax lien sale, only to find out that these homeowners are fearful of speaking to me due to the fact that they don't know whether I'm one of those people that's calling them to try to get them to sell their homes to them, when only thing I'm trying to do is trying to give them resources on and give them some sort of help on how to remove their homes or how to go about removing their homes from the tax lien sale. People are afraid. And I'm talking about seniors who have paid off their mortgages, may owe a water bill, may have had tenants who lived in their homes who, due to COVID, have not been able to pay their rent, but their landlord is sympathetic with them. The homeowner is sympathetic with them. So the homeowner is not going to throw them out. But now the homeowner owes taxes. So I've been reaching out to homeowners. They do not want to talk to people. And I can understand that, because due to the tax lien sale, these people's homes are listed publicly. So then you get the vultures, you get the real estate high-end people calling these people, trying to get them to sell their homes to them. Like I said, from hearing from people about its negative impacts, we have developed a campaign to replace the lien sale altogether. This threat of selling your homes is not a way to do it. There are other means of how to get to people. Like we say, people pay their taxes, but there should be some sort of resources that's put out, that's available to them. We've held press conferences and rallies to push the city council and the mayor to abolish the lien sale. Back in October of 2020, we held a press conference in front of 250 Broadway, where we had a lot of some city council members, some elected officials who rallied with us to abolish this tax lien sale. Not only that, in November, we rallied at an address in East New York, where there's a building there that probably housed about 8 to 10 families in there. And we know that this building has now was put on the tax lien sale, and all those people became homeless due to the fact that this building is no longer being used to house families. Now they're a part of the shelter system. Like I said, via phone calls, foot networking on the street, how I've personally gone through COVID, knocking on people's doors who we felt were on a tax lien sale list, and people are just afraid to talk. So we really need to do something about how we address these homeowners who are on this tax lien sale. We need to abolish this tax lien sale. It is truly, truly detrimental to the people of Black and brown color. I thank you for your time, and I'll pass it back to our moderator.
Thank you so much, Deb, for sharing that information, because you explained very clearly how this coalition was formed on a grassroots level, and we decided to respond to this economic violent threat to our communities. Thank you for all that you're doing. Right now, I'm going to bring up Memo.
Hey, hi, Memo Salazar. I'm a co-chair of the Western Queens Community Land Trust. And excited to have been working with all these great folks on this. So yeah, as you heard, we did a lot of on the ground work, and this is where you guys come in, because the city council is in charge of figuring out the legislation for this. And usually what happens is I think it's every 4 years, this comes up for renewal, and it just kind of keeps getting rubber stamped in every 4 years. Nobody really understands it. That's one of the reasons why we're having this today. It's a confusing thing. There's not a lot of information about it. And nobody talks about it until like you've got a couple weeks, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, we got to do this and we got to pass it soon, and everybody just kind of rubber stamps it, and boom, you've got another 4 years of it. And nobody even knows what happens. And so this year, thankfully, we really got our act together, and we worked with a lot of council members, educating them, and as a result, we were able to put a pause on this. The lien sale, well, part of the lien sale itself is frozen partly because of COVID, but instead of rubber stamping another 4 years, we got the city council to do 1 year. and we're spending this year coming up with a new system. The city council has thrown some money into a task force, so we're actually making this, we're putting time and research and money into this. And some of you will be on that council and we'll be having to figure out what exactly, how we're going to change this really problematic issue. So this is our proposal. This is a work in progress. You are all welcome to be a part of this solution, and that is the whole point of this. But it's a work in progress, but it is a working version of, you know, an alternative to this very predatory private trust system that we have now. And it involves CLTs, because CLTs, community land trusts, are, maybe that's not the only way to getting us out of this housing crisis, but it is certainly the most equitable and pragmatic way that I've seen, and it's the reason I got involved in this. And we will talk more about CLTs, but we can start. We'll kind of guide you through our vision here. If we go to the next slide. All right, so first of all, the city sends bills to property owners for water, property taxes, and so on. This is not that different. You know, people start falling behind on payments. So now the city starts trying to collect their money, obviously. And then people can't pay their bills, assuming they can't pay the bills. The city would send some letters. It could add interest rates, but however, unlike the current model, where as soon as it gets, currently when the debt gets sold to the private trust, they start adding these very predatory interest rates. They start adding fees, all sorts of fees and so on. And so you might have owed $10,000, it very quickly becomes $20,000. It very quickly becomes more and more and more, and you just fall more and more behind. So this, you know, with the city being the tax collector, that would not happen. We would keep the fees very low and make it as easy as possible for folks to get back on track paying their bills. That's the whole point of this. Okay, so then, you know, if for some reason the person is unable to pay after a certain amount of time or a threshold of money, the city would offer the property owner a resolution where they could transfer the deed to a nonprofit CLT. We need to, just to be clear, the way, and we haven't explained CLTs, so this might be a little confusing, but CLTs would own the land, but that doesn't mean they're owning the house that's on the land. And so that's an important sort of distinction. So it's a little confusing to understand, but the CLT owns the land. The homeowner still gets to be in their house. It's not like it's been converted. It's still their home. They can still own it. They can still give it to their kids as long as they're paying their taxes and so on, just like a regular private house. But the land is now owned by the community, and that ensures permanent affordability. So if at some point in the future somebody wanted to sell that house, they can't just sell it at whatever market rate happens to be happening at that moment. They have to pay it forward, basically. And that's a really important distinction. So so this would be an option right here for the owner to be like, okay, you can stay, you can keep your house, but it is now a CLT managed house. Okay, so that is an option. And then if the owner chooses not to, let's go back one slide, thank you. If the owner chooses not to do that, well, then the city can start the foreclosure process. And again, during foreclosure, while negotiating, they can offer the CLT option or a regulatory agreement of some kind. So the point of this is to give the homeowner as many opportunities as possible to keep their home, right? That's like the most important thing here. We're not trying to, it's not like CLTs are like some alternate version of the private trust where now the CLTs are trying to gobble up everything. The whole point of this is to keep people in their homes. And the CLT is a community. It's a community. It's us trying to figure out a way to create that kind of safety net and foundation for folks. All right. So we're in foreclosure. And then if we move on to the next slide, if it wins a foreclosure, the city would then have the property, and then they would decide what to do with the property. And then if you notice this dotted line, these are suggestions, right? This is not hard coded in. We're just suggesting the city could then transfer it to a CLT. So in other words, now the CLT is working with a nonprofit developer. So in other words, if say it's a 3-family home, the CLT owns the land, The developer is sort of the management company, they're the landlords and they're running the building. But either way, the whole point is now this building is a permanently affordable building or home. It is no longer a private home that is subject to the whims of the market. Or the city could transfer to a land bank, which has been suggested by, for many years it's been discussed. And the land bank could transfer it to CLTs at some point, or other nonprofits that are mission driven. Doesn't have to be a CLT. But that's the basic idea. The plan is to remove as much as we can off the market, keep it in the hands of people, keep it in the hands of the community. That's basically our suggestion. Okay, so now I'm going to pass it to Afia to continue our discussion.
Thank you, Memo. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Al.
Yes, I just simply want to say thank you, Memo, for actually sharing that information. And I just want to reinforce to our audience, to the candidates and the staff of the candidates, how this coalition recognized not only raised the alarm about this specific issue, but is actually coming back with tangible solutions in regards to address this. So thank you, Memo, for articulating our views of how this will actually transform and have major impact in our communities. Thank you. And I will now transition over to Afia.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Afia Lehens. I am a resident of East New York, as well as a member of the East New York CLT. And I'll be reviewing with you a list of year-to-date accomplishments of the coalition, starting with our success in limiting the reauthorization of the tax lien sale to just 1 year, as Memo mentioned earlier. And you can just click to the side. We also were successful in securing public funding for outreach and education for those most impacted by the tax lien sale. And we have been successful in having the formation of a task force with community stakeholders to formulate an alternative method for the tax lien sale. And the task force has just appointed our very own Deborah Ack. I would also like to mention, for the record, the task force is not funded, has not been funded by the city. I would also like to point out, as one of our successes, we were able to have small property owners exempt that were suffering hardship related to COVID. And we've also substantially reduced the number of other properties eligible for the lien sale by raising the threshold for the eligibility of the tax lien sale. In the next slide, we have listed what has happened to the tax lien sale during the COVID-19 pandemic. And on September 4th, the mayor had postponed the tax lien sale to the 24th of September. And shortly after, the governor issued an executive order prohibiting any sale of the tax liens until December 3rd. This was later extended to January 29th. And during this time, the DOF will continue to work with property owners whose tax lien is at risk of being sold. And I will now pass it on to Ivy.
Thank you, Afia. I'm going to talk about how the administration is trying to beat this back. And I also want to just answer a quick question from the Q&A. Somebody asked what is what we're proposing. What we're proposing is an end to the tax lien sale. And although we've been trying to work with the city on an end to the tax lien sale, what we've heard and what we think we will continue to hear is that we can't stop the tax lien sale because delinquency rates will explode, property tax revenue will fall, and probably the sky will fall too. But what we know to be the case, and what you can see here on this screenshot from the controller, delinquency rates are already rising. And the reason isn't because it's the 70s again and the tax lien sale was eliminated, but rather because the world is going through a pandemic and people are suffering and people have liquidity issues. So in scaremongering with delinquency rates, one thing that the administration is willfully ignoring is that tax lien sales are not the only stick. They're not the only enforcement mechanism. And in fact, they're not a very good enforcement mechanism. So with that, I'll pass it back to Paula, who can tell you more about cities that have gone the way that we should.
Thanks, Ivy. So if you remember at the beginning, I mentioned that actually cities that don't do this have higher rates of collecting taxes in the first year that they're billed, because people want to pay their taxes, right? People want to feel a civic responsibility, and actually the opportunity to have it go to some third party that's an anonymous hedge fund that creates an out. Other cities do not do this. Major cities in this country have never securitized their tax debt the way New York City has. In fact, what we do here is illegal in 21 states. And of all the places that also tried it, because Giuliani's banking friends and Arthur Anderson recommended it in the 90s as a strategy, they all stopped. Jersey City, New Haven, Atlanta, DC, Philadelphia, Puerto Rico, cities in upstate New York, they all did one or two securitizations like the ones we've been doing every year since 1996 and said, wait a second, this is working at cross purposes. This is not good government. This might be great for the investors, but we're not here to help the investors. We're here to help our cities. We're here to help our residents. And so they have all stopped doing those securitizations. I know from working with advocates in Philadelphia that they're still cleaning up from liens that were sold back in 1997 on both people's homes and on vacant properties, where there's still a tax lien trust that still owns those certificates from 1997. They're trying to figure out what to do with. And even if we get rid of the lien sale in New York now, we will also have to go down that journey, because we have been selling liens on properties for over 2 decades, and those are recorded. They're on every property, and they need to be cleared if they're going to go away. I also saw a question in the chat about our proposal, and Memo kind of alluded to it, talking about what the role of a community land trust is. So a lot of the groups here who are hosting this conversation today got here because we've been looking at our neighborhoods and saying, how do we make sure that affordable housing stays affordable? How do we make sure that the agencies are following their mandates? How do we make sure that opportunities are flowing to community organizations and not to for-profit vultures? And the Community Land Trust is something that we came up with as a really good solution, because it creates a mechanism for community control of development. What that means specifically is a community organization that owns the land, that then ground leases it to a developer, to a family, to a co-op, to whoever owns the building. And then through that ground lease, actually regulates very specifically what happens on that parcel, and does it with a community organization as the regulator. Right now, the only real regulator that most property owners know about in New York is HPD. There have been a couple of folks in the chat who have asked about HPDs, saying they're not transparent. They're allowing developers to get away with, hiding their books, doing this kind of thing. We're in a very big city. HPD is a city agency. They are not the community. And we've learned in these 20 years, cannot do this alone. And so we're not saying we need to get rid of HPD and we need to get rid of HPD regulation. We're saying we need, in addition, a different kind of community regulation and community control. And that's what introducing a community land trust will let us do. I snuck that in. I'm really supposed to talk about the city budget, which is big. And the amount of money that the lien sale brings in is that tiny. I think you can see my cursor. See that line? That's about it. It might actually be a little bit fat, this line. And property taxes are just a third of the city's budget. And we're just talking about this tiny, tiny, tiny little bit. And that is the last slide.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Paula. Now we're going to go into the Q&A portion right now. And I'm asking everyone to take this moment to please type in your questions in the Q&A section so they can be answered accordingly by our dynamic coalition members, John Krinsky, Paula Siegel, Sam Stein, and Ivy Perez. And in the interim, while you're getting your questions together to type into the Q&A, I definitely want to also share with you that on April 21st, Nicely New Economy Project and Public Banking New York will also be hosting a candidates forum to teach candidates more about CLTs and public banking. And if you have any additional questions as far as what is the CLT, how it operates, how it can be very impactful and galvanizing in your community, that's an event you definitely could attend to get additional information. So I want to ask Will if he could put that link into the chat so folks may have that opportunity. And also, if you could give virtual hand claps to our dynamic panelists that shared this information: Paula Siegel, Hannah Anousheh, Afia Lathans, Deborah Ack, Memo Salazar, Will Spyak. This is a citywide movement. And one of the main stressors in the city is housing. We feel that by reforming and getting rid of this tax lien sale is just for our community. We have to stop the economic violence that's taking place along those lines. With that being said, I'm going to turn over this portion to John, Paula, Sam, and Ivy, and just basically just read off some of the questions that were entered in either in the chat or the Q&A, and then answer it out loud. And I'll turn it over to Paula. You're on mute.
Sorry, what am I doing now?
I was asking either you, John, Ivy, or Sam, the questions that were typed in either in the Q&A or chat. If either, I know some were responded to in that Q&A section, but if you could read off some of the questions and some of the answers.
Okay, well, so somebody just asked, what are other cities doing that don't require tax lien sales? They're doing pretty much what Memo described. Sometimes they work with a land bank, sometimes they work with some other third party, but they're doing their own tax collection. They don't hire a third party servicer. They don't let rich ladies get richer. They just collect taxes like cities do. They did not, get on the Rudy Giuliani Wall Street is better at running everything than we are train. It's really not rocket science. It does involve hiring municipal employees. That doesn't seem like a bad thing to do right now while everybody's looking for jobs. And somebody else asked if there was legislation that we were proposing. We're not proposing legislation. The lien sale would not exist if the city council did not pass legislation to allow the city to do the lien sale. The last lien sale authorization that expired was in 2020. The administration asked the city council to renew for another 4 years. We said hell no, and we stopped them from doing that. And so they renewed for a single year, and then they made a whole bunch of concessions to our coalition, which I'll go back to that slide, making that renewal not only just a single year renewal, but securing public funding for outreach and education, which is hopefully going to get to community-based organizations soon, so they can look at the list of folks that Department of Finance is creating about who is eligible for the lien sale and start working with those folks and make sure that those lists get smaller. The task force was something that we helped envisage. We set its mission, and we also made sure that it was going to have community members on it, that it wouldn't just be some task force of technocrats from the administration and the council. and we raise the floor for when folks are eligible for the lien sale. This all goes for a year. If this, at the end of this year, the city council could just not pass another reauthorization, and we could become just like Los Angeles or Boston or San Francisco, where we would have our own municipal debt problems and we would solve them with public solutions instead of a private debt collection system.
Thank you.
I think I answered a couple of questions there that I saw came up.
Okay. All right, so we're just going to move forward into the program. And thank you, Paula, for answering those questions. Thank you, John. I've seen that you had answered some questions in the chat as well as in the Q&A as well. So candidates and the staff of candidates, where do we go from here? You heard the information. You heard why it's so important to abolish the tax lien sale. We ask that what you could do now is more or less a call to action and how you and things that you can do. If you could, we'll be sending out, we ask you that you read the report and articles that will be sent out. We ask that you share the information that you heard today with your staff, as well as the and the candidates to share it with their staff and with the community as well. We encourage you to incorporate your stance on the tax lien sale into your platform. And most importantly, we hope that this is a spark for increased communications between each and every one of you and the Abolish the Tax Lien Sale Coalition. And something you could do immediately after this event, we encourage you to go to Twitter right now and share your reactions to this briefing. We find it very, very important. This is a grassroots organizations throughout the city that recognize that this is impacting the 5 boroughs. And we decided not to only just focus on the challenges and raising the issues, but we have some tangible solutions to solve this and a true action plan. And with that being said, I want to again thank our distinguished panelists. I want to thank everyone, all of our community partners, but most importantly, thank you, the candidates and the staff of candidates, for taking time out to attend this event. You found it that it was very important and pressing and to help your community. Hannah, if you can go to the slide with the contact information. Although this slide will be sent out to the attendees via email, but this is our contact information if you want to write it down at this time. With that being said, until we meet again, thank you, in solidarity. Good night.
So if you try to reach out to us, and so I'm unmuted. We might can't pick up our phone. So.
Oh, and somebody's got their hand up. Wow, we're learning how to use this.
They do?
Caitlin did? Wait.
Oh, hello. Wait, can you guys hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I saw Hannah unmuted me. So
okay.
now I could talk to you through.
Oh, I think maybe.
I think I meant to mute you.
Wait, I see. Okay, we've still got 8 attendees here with us, and one of them raised their hand for a second. I'm gonna let them talk if they want to. I think for a second.
Caitlin says it was a mistake.
Oh, okay, great. Mike, and then. Oh, there you are. You're allowed to talk, but I'm gonna fix that soon.
I just close this. Should I just?
I think so. Can we get on a private Zoom and debrief for a minute? Can you text everybody?
Sure. Here.
Can you add me to the next Zoom?
Oh yeah. Here, guys, just stay on for 1 second, and I'll just send you the Zoom link in the chat.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Really slow. Give me a sec. Okay. Okay, there you go. Everyone have it?
You know, we're not sure what's going on
I
there.
don't see it.
Kids fighting, stuff like that. Mike and
Oh,
the YCOs. went
Oh yeah,
today.
you've got to
Mike
send it
wasn't
to,
today, but I
to
don't
that
know.
person.
Just
Yeah,
email it
Um,
to me or something.
cars with the keys
Yeah.
in the ignition.
Okay.
You're all set.
How many
Here,
people were in
Maria's
this thing?
Here, Roger's here. Everyone just blast that out. Do not leave your cars running anywhere. Cross Bay
Wait, how many?
Stores, in
Here,
front of your house,
hold on, let's just
driveway. Don't leave the keys in
Sorry,
the car, please, because this is not getting any better.
sorry, that's something else I'm doing for work. But how many did you say?
Here, I want to just like get off. I think there were 50 at one point. Here, let's
Okay.
just talk on the other one.